This is Director Buford. I can't hear anything and I can't see anything.
Yes, ma'am, we hear you loud and clear. The audio isn't set up just yet. We're working on that right now.
Okay, thank you. It's Dr. Buford will be getting started in just a few.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's not. That's why. Yes.
Chairman, we are live.
I'd like to welcome everyone to today's special call. At this time, can we do a roll call, please?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Alderman. Director Snowden? Not present. Director Odell? Not present. Director Noah? Not present. Director Lockett? Not present. Director Robinson? Present. Director Buford?
Present.
Director Leggett?
Here.
Thank you. Director Taylor?
Here.
Thank you. And Chairman Cody?
Here.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. While this meeting was advertised as a board workshop, we're using this opportunity to introduce the Ferry Transit Development Plan to both the board and the public. Today, we have Jim Ritchie with WRA Consulting. Will present an overview of the project, followed by an open floor for input and feedback. We encourage everyone to share their thoughts and questions to help shape this important initiative. I thank you for being here, and we look forward to this session. At this time, I would like to turn it forward to Mr. Ritchie for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. What an exciting time for Savannah. I saw in the news yesterday the opening of the convention center. And one of the great things they were bragging about was the new ferries. And John, when did the new ferries arrive?
On Saturday morning.
Saturday morning. That is incredible. 2 brand new hybrid ferries. And and they will be in service here for 25 years.
The idea, yes, sir.
right? And making a huge difference. Well, what we wanted to do in this transit development plan for the ferry service is help the board and the community understand the different choices that the area has for how we use these ferries. The ferries will be a key public transit service for residents back and forth across the river, and also supporting the visitor business. And it's really important that we start with an understanding both of those aspects of the service, both the demand by our residents and folks getting to jobs on Hutchinson Island and folks living on Hutchinson Island, as well as the visitor community, are important pieces of the transit development plan. Now, what we've done is we have looked into past operating expenses for the ferries. We have built a model to project future expenses for the ferry. And we've also looked at how the program is currently being funded. And what we really find is, first of all, is that the ferry is really an essential service for the expanded Hutchinson Island facilities. We've got good capital flow of funds coming. We've got the money for the ferry. We've got the money for the landings. We've got the money for a maintenance facility, but we don't have enough money to operate the service. And that's really the key finding, is that while the per occupied room funding of $987,000 a year that we currently get doesn't cover our $2 million current operating cost for the ferry. Now, with the new convention center, the demand across the river is going to really grow. And we're going to have some meetings where we're going to have 3, 4, maybe even 5 ferries in operation for those meetings. When we're operating at that level, it's the equivalent of the bridge, and I'll show you that in just a minute. It's as if we built a new bridge across the river when we're operating at that level. Now, I also want you to know that we did look very closely, and we'll share that with you, into the Plant Riverside landing, and boy, it has real benefits. We're not going to really dive into today all the different ways we can run the ferries. Whatever other routes can be, we want to make sure we get additional input before we do that. But the bottom line, the real thing that we want to communicate, is that CAT cannot operate the ferry, and especially an expanded ferry, without additional local funding resources. Now, some of you know that I've been engaged with you all now for about 3 or 4 years. The transit system has additional improvements that I want to see happen. We've got to get every 30-minute service on Water Street. We need to get a more frequent service on Route 31. Those are my 2 that are still to come. And we do not want to rob the local system for the ferry. We've got to have additional resources for the ferry service. Now, I wanted to emphasize that the ferry program is under the federal transit requirements. First of all, the key definition of transit is that we have to provide public transportation. It's not for private conventions. It is for all residents and riders. And every time we're using the ferries, we can't say, oh no, this is just for the Association of County Commissioners. It is a public service that is open to the public always. We also want to emphasize one of the key things that we're running into with our older ferries. We've got to use these things for the FTA useful life. And that's 25 years for the ferries. And another important piece is generally, we gotta try to stay with a 20% spare ratio. And right now, we've got a pretty good sized fleet, or we'll even have a little bit larger fleet. And to stay within that 20% spare ratio, we've got to operate some service. Now, let's talk about the ferry service background and benefits. Clearly, you all know, we operate a free service across the river. The convention center has had almost a $300 million expansion, and that expansion will really spur real growth and demand for the ferry. We're replacing the older vessels on Saturday. Two new vessels arrived, and what we're trying to look at in the transit development plan is the cost of the service and the potential need for changes in both infrastructure and the operation itself. Now, look to Daisy, for some reason I jumped through a fast. Oh, there we go. Okay, the real benefit of the ferry is twofold. It's both connection for residents and for visitors. It's access to jobs on Hutchinson Island, the increased number of jobs at the convention center, as well as the one hotel that's there now and the expanded hotel. We think it'll also be key for reducing the convention center's parking needs and to make the visitor industry really thrive in downtown Savannah. I mentioned that it's like the Talmadge Bridge. The Talmadge Bridge carries 22,600 vehicles a day, according to GDOT. Last June, rather, we carried 8,285 passenger trips in a single day across the river. So we are already not quite half the capacity of that bridge in a single day. When we have additional larger conventions coming, I think we'll be up to 15,000 daily rides that you'll be providing. And again, getting very close to the cost of the bridge. But realize that you don't have to have that bridge operating every day. You don't have to have all of the operating expense or all the capital expense. Or imagine the disruption in your community if we added another bridge and had to put all these highway ramps in and all that would be taken. The ferry really does give you that bridge across the river. Oh, back the other way. Now, I wanted to just do a quick comparison of running a bus shuttle and running the ferry across the river. Now, let's say we have a large convention and we need to do 1,000 passengers an hour. If we run the buses, it's roughly an hour round trip, 30 minutes to go over and 30 minutes to get back. To move 1,000 in an hour, we need 50 buses in that operation. And for that, if we run it for 12 hours, that shuttle service will cost between $60,000 and $90,000 per day. And we've got all of this bridge and downtown traffic to work with. Now with the ferry, 3 ferries, each making 3 trips in an hour, carry 1,341 rider capacity. So every 20 minutes, we're able to cycle the ferries across the river. If we fully allocate our ferry costs, we're only a quarter of the cost of the bus shuttle service at $13,000 to $18,000 a day. And we don't have all the disruptions downtown that the bus shuttle is doing. Now, this is from your operation last June. Now, I took some select days from the ridership count that the captains were doing to look at the ridership when there was a convention and the ridership when there wasn't a convention. And the first part of the of the month. June the 1st through June the 9th, there was no convention in town. We had one ferry in operation, but we're carrying some days 2,000 rides a day with that one ferry and 2 crews. Well, National Beta Club came, and John and his crews were doing all they could to operate service across the river, peaking on the 17th, I believe, of June, with over 8,000 rides a day. Now, then comes the Georgia Municipal Association Convention and Argo Chemical, smaller convention, but still very significant ridership that you have. The rides per hour also shows you that on some days you were full. You couldn't, I mean, at 149 passengers, you have to say, hold on, folks, you have to wait for the next ferry. And there were some trips, I suspect many of them on those with the Beta Club, where you were, I can't allow anybody else on the ferry.
So you would have hundreds of people waiting.
Yeah.
I would say no more. There would be a lot of 200 to 300 people waiting.
And incredibly efficient service in terms of carrying folks. We just need more seats for the folks to be able to ride.
But why is the June the most productive month? Why June particularly? Why did you select June?
Well, because that's, I had the data. And we also had this really large convention during June. You have also many large conventions during the fall.
Right.
Spring it doesn't seem to be quite as active, and I'll show you the calendar for the meetings in a minute. But part of the reason that I used June is, number one, John got me the data for it, and then number two, it really was a very large convention that you had. Now, I did go back and look at the try to compare a rides by hour or no convention versus big convention. And this just shows when we have no convention, we have a lot of trips running across the river. And these are not simply empty boats that are running back and forth. We have, by all hours of the day, good ridership on this service. And of course, this shows what it was on the heaviest day. And I'm sure the 9 o'clock at night coming back was when you were cycling ferries as fast as you could cycle them for the folks that were waiting. This just shows from the convention sales report what is coming in the next year. And I'm sure this is now out of date, that this was a few months ago when we captured this information. And so I wanted to figure out from the fair or from the convention schedule, how many peak ferry days we were going to need and how many times that we needed multiple crews. I mean, on a normal day, you should have 2 crews with 1 ferry. But on peak days, you may need 4, maybe 6 crews that are available for the peak days. And so what I was trying to do here was to figure out a little bit how often that was. Now, I also think that the convention sales are not up to par yet. That with the convention center taking longer to finish, they are not likely to have been able to close all the deals that they could have closed. And so I suspect the 2025 convention are going to be a slower year than 26 or 27 or 28 are going to be. Now, Stephanie asked me about what is the economic impact? What does it all entail? And honestly, I don't know. It is from the convention sales report, and it's what the convention folks are saying they believe their direct economic impact is from the convention business. And you can see both the attendance and the number of contract rooms by a quarter. Now, you also see from it that the first part of the year seems to be stronger than the last part of the year. That also might be just the lag in bookings that will occur as well. Now, let's talk about money for a minute. And we went back to your actuals and Stephanie was good enough to get me your actual financial back a number of years. And so I used it both for the bus cost model as well as the ferry cost model. And in fiscal 21, you had an operating deficit in the service of around $413,000. And you see that growing until we were right at $1.2 million in this budget year that we're in right now. And that's if we don't increase service at all with the new ferries. And I think it may be a little bit of time before you do that. I also want to point out the insurance value is based upon the actual insurance prices that have been paid. We had to pay $174,000 of insurance for the two new ferries. Now, other thing I wanted to also point out is that we have applied CAT's overhead as well. And CAT's overhead is 28.5% of the operating expenditures is what we're allocating to the ferry.
Now, I'm sorry, you said that you included insurance for the new ferries. In the other figures, the insurance for the existing ferries were not included?
No, the existing ferries were included. It's that we had a budget number in fiscal 25.
That we said we projected that we'd have to pay that much.
Yes, and it was higher. It was 400 and some thousand. And I adjusted it down when I learned of what the actual insurance costs were. So this $393,807 is your actual insurance cost for your existing vessels plus the two new ones.
Now, this may be a finance question, but if we've been operating at a deficit, how have we covered? If we weren't getting monies from the hotel, motel tax or whatever, how are we covering the deficits?
Transit tax.
And that's always a
General fund.
the general fund dollars. So in our FY 2026 budget, we'll see if we project that we're going to keep losing monies on the ferries.
Well, right now, we are in deep discussion with members of the Sandy Board. When the Savannah Bells Ferry system was created, it was a collage of members. And at year end, there was a true-up to cover the deficit. And pre-COVID, that occurred annually. After COVID, that has not occurred, but we're working towards getting back to the year-end true-up so that it does not impact the CAT's general fund.
And I guess I had another question. It was more about, at some point, were we getting money from the West, like 25,000?
We get 50,000, and that's to cover transportation costs for their workers to get to and from work.
But it's applied to,
yes,
that
yes.
but we're still getting that.
We're still getting it. It's included in that agency revenue ferry line. The total revenue is in that, yes.
So this is the history, but more important is where are we now? How do those funds are derived? And we have some might look at Hutchinson Island and think, boy, there's going to be enough taxes generated there to pay for this expense. And I wanted to actually go through that in enough detail so that you can understand what transit taxes we're generating from Hutchinson Island, as well as any other visitor taxes that are being generated. And Hutchinson Island itself is the Ferry Special Tax District. And it is a couple points on the mill against the properties there. It only generates in the city budget $8,487. Then we also get the per occupied room, and I'm gonna show you in a second the amount that is totally generated in the per occupied room. That's $1 per occupied room in the downtown district. Then there's the transit tax millage. And for fiscal 24, it was $54,622 that were generated from Hutchison. I'm also going to show you the Federal Transit Administration and how those funds are generated. We actually get, based upon the mileage that the ferry runs back and forth, about 90 cents a mile. And if we can put odometers on the buses and run them, or on the ferries and run them faster, we can get more. Just kidding. But it's roughly 90 cents a mile for every mile. So really you only get 1 mile across and 1 mile back. Each time is 90 cents coming from the federal government. Then there's a capital program, the 5337 program, that also provides some federal transit funding. And you'll see over here on the chart where we have applied those funds, the same operating costs as we saw earlier. But then each one of these ferry revenues show that after deducting the federal funding as well, we've got $1,053,000 shortfall.
Versus 1,194,390 that was on the previous page.
The previous page,
You saw FY5 budget.
that's the previous page, the FY25 budget shows a shortfall before applying any federal funds of $1,194,390. This page then applies the 5307 ferry maintenance funds, $85,000 that are earned from the ferry operation. As well, and that's what gets us to now, after applying the federal funds, gets us to the deficit of $1,053,000.
Jim, you think we'll be able to get any of our federal money? That previous money that we applied for.
We do draw federal dollars every year.
I'm talking with the new administration, are you releasing any
They-
federal dollars
they-
for us?
As of today, we're getting draws. Now, what happens next week? We don't.
I'm going to show you how, we think the formula programs are generally safe. It is, now, it may be, the congressional budget may reduce our formula program, but we think the formula programs are pretty safe. It is the discretionary grants that we're not likely to see more of. And the ferry program is part of the formula program. We think it's relatively safe at that end. Now, here we put together a financial projection of if we had two additional vessels in operation in fiscal 26, what would the shortfall be? And then if we add another vessel, and it's primarily the insurance cost for another vessel, that gets us up to $2.6 million shortfall. Now here, other thing that we show is when we add more ferries in operation, our federal funding goes to roughly double and then a little bit more. So that's, if we have more ferry operation, we get about $100,000 more a year in federal funding for the operation. But that's really just going to support the maintenance on the ferry fleet.
Do we get any consideration that we upgraded the ferry?
No, that does not increase your the federal revenue. We've got this obligation to operate them though now for 25 years. That's the useful life of the ferries. Yes.
Well, looking at all the numbers, right, operating costs, it's maintenance costs high because of the overuse of the ferries we have now. With the new ferries offset that cost, maintenance cost.
The new ferries should reduce your fuel costs significantly. The new ferries should have somewhat lower maintenance costs, especially for the first couple of years where you're gonna have some warranty. You've had big repairs on the 20-year-old ferries, as you'd expect, that they've been in water and they've been working for a long time. But the new ferries should ultimately have some reduction. And I haven't tried necessarily to reflect that because the costs that I'm showing are the routine. I don't show some of the, what has been funded through other grants, the major capital maintenance for the ferry.
Now, remember, we won't see the true benefits of the hybrid ferry simply because all of the electric infrastructure is not in place where we can use electric power versus diesel fuel. So once that infrastructure is in place, we should see a significant decrease in operating costs.
How long do we expect to pull the
Well, it's really driven by Georgia Power's schedule. And right now, they're really busy, so we are continuously pushing to make sure our projects get underway. But we are on the project list.
They haven't given us an estimate.
Not a definite date. They just finished up the overhead charger at the ITC. So ferry infrastructure, that's next on the horizon. So we've identified funding. It's on their plate, but we don't have a definitive date as to when they're going to start.
Now, this just shows what happens with revenue hours and ridership. And it's very tentative here on what are we actually running, because there will be days going forward that you only have one ferry in operation. And when ridership is relatively low, you'll only run one. But there will be larger conventions where we'll be running 2, 3, and I think even 4 or 5 ferries. But this was a relatively simple forecast so that you could see how it was different in terms of the amount of revenue hours as well as the amount of ridership on the ferry. Now, we did do as well an evaluation of the landings, both from a transit customer perspective as well as from a hotel and motel perspective. Now, we currently have the 3 landings, the one over at the convention center, the City Hall landing, and the Waiting Girl landing. And we looked at the hotels within walking distance of those, as well as the new landing that is being planned at Plant Riverside. This just shows the investigation that we had into the hotel growth. And to see if with hotel growth, we didn't want to make sure we're not having landings and not having hotels. We want both to work for it. And there are currently 5,943 existing hotel rooms with per occupied room accounts. That's hotels with 25 or more beds that are in a specific district that I'll also show you in a minute. We expect 750 new hotel rooms are planned, including the new 400-room convention center hotel, which would be about a 12% growth in the number of hotel rooms. So we did a little bit of a measurement of how many hotel rooms are around each one of the landings. And we measured, and this is one of the neat things you can do with Google Maps, is we measure the walking time that Google Maps says how far it is. And we measured 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30 minutes. And I'm picking 15 minutes as the time that I think most people will walk from the hotel to the ferry landing. And what we found is that the City Hall landing has the most hotel rooms within the 15-minute walk at 4,169. And the Waiting Girl landing existing landing has 2,153. But the new landing that's planned at Plain Riverside also has substantial number, 3,200 hotel rooms that are within a 15-minute or walking distance of the Plant Riverside landing. It's not just about visitors. In fact, as more important, it's about people that ride transit and are able to get to the ferry. And so we measured the walking times for transit areas. The Cat Intermodal Transit Center, the Yamacraw Housing Development, I know that is likely to be phased out. New development will go into the Yamacraw area. The East Savannah Gateway revitalization area, we also measured walking distance as well as your 3 dock shuttle stops. And Plant Riverside does very well as a transit connection.
Question, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Did you factor in the Airbnbs in that area also with the hotel?
If they have 25 rooms or more. Yes.
A lot of them have morphed into,
Yeah.
some of them started off as 4-bedroom and
Yeah.
they morphed into like 15 to 20 bedrooms. That's 20 people between the garage and the actual house.
Yeah, right now, the tax requires 25 rooms. Now, that's also something that the city could consider, is lowering that threshold from the 25 to something lower.
Well, we just starting to identify which Airbnbs are actually Airbnbs or in, because they are not reporting that we've done all this construction on the inside, which is a 4-bedroom, and then you go and looking at a 25-bedroom. So that's what we're looking at right now. I'm actually getting my head down.
How do you get 25 beds in a 4-bedroom?
And that's how they knocked down walls, they built stuff, but they kept the same outside. But inside, they took everything out and they created a bunch of rooms.
Maybe it's unclear. When you talk about the Plant River landing,
Yes,
does that mean that we're currently not getting the hotel motel tax from the hotel zone?
no, it does not. It does not.
Okay,
The POR district includes those new hotels that are there as well. And what I'm trying to really show is that the investment that you're working on for the Plant Riverside landing is working. That, you've been to bid once and were unable to have all the funding for it. I believe you're going to bid again for that. I think it's, at least from the numbers of rooms as well as the transit walking, it's a worthwhile investment.
Let me ask you one question. You mentioned about the number of rooms, but are you factoring in also the room nights? How many rooms we occupy?
Well, this is just on the total number of rooms. I did not have occupancy data for each hotel to do that.
How do they factor in that?
Yeah, I suspect ones that are maybe closer to City Hall landing maybe have a higher occupancy rate than some that are farther away.
We think we can get some true data from the transaction data coming up and see just how much more ridership we have.
Well, are we going to be ready to be in operation with enough ferries? I mean, the issue I think is going to end up being captains and crews and what we can actually run.
Not necessarily. We would have to actually the crews, I think, to run a few ferries. Let's have one operational ferry, not including our 2 million. Our 2 new ones need a lot of Coast Guard approval before we get going. And I do want to go ahead and throw this up there. This is a brand new type of vessel for our local Coast Guard and for us at the same time. So our local Coast Guard is essentially learning alongside of us on all the regulations that they've never even seen before. So it's hard to say at this moment when we're going to have our file what's called certificate of inspection to allow for passenger service on our new hydrants. That could be a good timeline 1 month from now, a bad timeline even further. So we're working really hard every day, working with the Coast Guard to get that done as quickly as possible. But I can't say whether or not on St. Patrick's Day will have them in operation, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, John, I'm working with City of Baltimore designing, 3 hybrid ferries. Now, in Baltimore, they are 49 passenger, not 149.
Okay.
But one of the real problems is, the fear of a thermal event, or fire.
That's
On
what
the-
Coast Guard's big.
Right, and that's where we've got to make sure, and they want to make sure that we have the plans in place that if we actually have a terrible event like that, we knew how to respond.
I believe we absolutely do. If one of the big benefits of these vessels being built in New York is that in that area, Coast Guard is very familiar with hydroelectric and electric. And they work really closely with our builders to make sure that they were following all the current regulations. And they actually made directors follow regulations that have not even been put on the books yet. They were trying to future-proof our vessels for regulations coming in the near future by the Coast Guard. So I think that's extremely helpful, and I think that'll be very helpful with our local Coast Guard, assuring them that these vessels are safe. And from what I've seen so far, they are very safe. They're as safe as you could possibly be for any type of electric hybrid system.
Right. This is the vessels that we currently have. And I mentioned here as well, the retirement years for the vessels. These vessels are required to stay in service for quite a long time.
And I think on the, go back to that slide.
Yeah.
There's some blank spaces, like on that first one. Well, I think that's the condition,
Yeah,
so, but it's not listed. So is that one that we rehabbed? And that's
John?
why the life of it,
So you're talking about the Mary Musgrove?
right,
Up there?
that rehab is the life, they've
So
got,
she has not, sorry, I said she, when I talk about vessels, that's traditional, that vessel has not been rehabbed, no.
so but the life of it seems to be extended. If you look at that chart,
yeah, the life of it was from the Federal Transit National Database and was listed as a 42-year useful life.
versus 25.
And that's actually one of the things that if you haven't already, you gotta be proactive with FTA to make sure they are accepting a reasonable useful life for the vessel.
But now, what is the condition of it? Because there is nothing in that column.
The vessel is still in good condition. It is, we have some maintenance projects we're going through right now to get her back into service, but other than that, she is in decent condition. There are some larger maintenance projects I'd like to do in the near future to keep her that way. But other than that, she is in good condition.
Because I think if you're gonna list them, I think that column should have been filled out as well.
Okay.
So if you're looking at it, you will know exactly, you see what I'm saying? Yeah. You go.
The ferry maintenance building that is planned is right next to the park and ride that is was built some time ago with federal funds. As I understand it, FTA wants to make sure that this ferry terminal is actually served. Now, today, you can't serve it. You can't serve it because slip 3 still has to be dredged. That dredging, I understand, is still underway sometime this spring, and that is the dredging of slip 3 is critical, not only to use the ferry terminal, but also the new maintenance facility that you see that I have just shown in with a bubble at the top of slip 3. The ferry maintenance facility is out to bid right now, or when are bids due? But that will be an incredible improvement from the parking stall maintenance facility that John and team work out on right now.
Can you go back to that, the vessel chart that we had earlier?
Yeah.
And when we look at the Susie King Taylor in that section, it says pending retirement. The retirement year is 2028. So what is the current condition? Is that the one that says,
No, that vessel is pretty far beyond repair. My estimate, if we wanted to put that vessel back in service, we're talking $1 million to $1.5 million investment to get her back into working condition.
Now,
So the
so-
condition is poor.
Very, very.
Well, what I'm saying, it says pending retirement, but then you have the retirement year of 2028.
Yes,
So you're saying for the next 3 years, you're just gonna keep that? Well, the brother,
it's not, it's at our dock right now, unfortunately, that's correct. Unless we plan on making a very large investment to getting it back going again, but vessel's not going anywhere.
Dr. Robinson, what happened, I can't remember if it was late 23, I believe it was. Pat had submitted a request to the FTA to plan to retire the vessel. During that process, it was found that premature retirement would actually require CAT to pay back the FTA for taking it out of service prematurely. There were grant funds that were already awarded and executed for repair of these boats during the useful life, and a lot of money had already gone into the repair of this vessel. So the pending retirement was really taken, early retirement has been taken off of the table.
Okay, so I know when we talked about this before, we talked about the difference between repairs and refurbishing. So that's what my question more about, if it's in that point, are we gonna spend the money?
We will spend money to keep it going until it's useful life. But millions and millions, no, that's not feasible. We will attempt to keep it going until the end of its useful life with the repairs needed to keep it going, but not major overhauls.
Let me make a correction, the Suzy King Harris specifically, to get it actually going, passenger service, will cost what I'm saying, over $1 million. That vessel is not usable right now,
Well, that's,
would be unusable.
okay, well, that needs to be updated because in the reports, when the premature retirement, the decision was made at the conversations with FTA that
For the Julia Norton level.
it was 2 boats that
was
were
2.
submitted for retirement, correct?
No, I believe it. I don't know.
Yes, it was 2 vessels.
Okay.
And procurement came back with that 42-year number, useful life came up. And there was conversation with FTA about whether the useful life of these vessels was actually 25 years or the 42 years, and that kind of stopped it. If it's 42 years, that's a long useful life and monies that we would have to actually pay back the FTA. So it kind of stopped there with the new ferry vessels coming on board and so on and so forth. But we actually have significant grant dollars for these vessel repairs.
So then even the 42 years useful life is based on whose assessment?
FTAs.
But if the ship are all built the same, you know, so
They were
that's
built, built in different years.
Yeah.
And what I'll do, because procurement had these conversations with the FTA as it relates to the useful life. And that's how we got into the 40 years and had to really, this was kind of before me, but rethink early retirement because of the amount of money we would have to pay back the FTA to retire.
Yeah, I remember that conversation. And then the Florence Martis, it says to be determined. And that was built in 2001. So 20.
She's our workhorse, she's a great load.
still operating.
That's the one that we have operating right now.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So it says, so we may not retire it after 25 years. That's why.
I don't see why we necessarily should, unless
Okay.
something major happens to it, but no, I think that vessel with the right care can last well into the future. It's one of the reasons why we based our new vessels off the design of that vessel. Because ease of use, ease of maintenance, cost of maintenance. The other vessels, I know the public loves how they look, but my personal opinion is that aesthetics were too much of a focus in the build of those vessels and not longevity or ease of maintenance or ease of use even. They look pretty, but that doesn't mean they work well, because they really don't.
And you're talking about quality.
Well, yeah, the aesthetics were much more favored rather than actual design and usefulness. So.
And so, so is that something that you negotiate with the FTA, or it's up to us whether we stop it after 25 years?
Well, really, it's contingent upon what the final is in terms of useful life. Originally, the useful life was designated as 25 years,
Right.
the history
Right.
of the vessel. But this conversation with FTA about the useful life of a ferry vessel should be 40 years. Now, whether or not it's etched in stone as of yet, that's what we'll need to do follow up on. And if that's the case, they expect us to run them for 40 years or else.
Well, so 25 would be the minimum
Yes.
that they would let you, because listen to what John is saying, you got a boat that's running well.
You don't have. You
Yeah.
keep it. If
Yeah.
it's running well, we keep it. You don't have to retire it.
Got it.
You can use it,
Mhm. That
extend it after the useful life, just like we do the fixed route bus.
Okay, that makes sense.
Some are fully depreciated, but they're still going.
That's right, yeah, I'd love to clarify for you real quick, because I know you're curious about this. The original Juliet Gordon Lowe, she's been in the shipyard for about 2 years now, she's on the verge of being all put back together, she is so pretty. And she is going to be put back into service, we are gonna rotate that vessel out with our new ones over time and put her into service when we need extra ones. The sister ship is CBP Fair, the one you were asking about, that's the one that's been sitting at our dock. Pending either retirement, if we can get it, or pending. It's hard to even throw out a number. I said over $1 million, most likely it would be more than $1 million to get that vessel back into operational service. But the Juliet Gordon Lowe, her sister ship, built in the same year, as you can see, that is on the verge of being back in service very soon.
And then I think I sent you an email, but the newer ones, we say is under construction.
That just happened.
It's complete. It just needs to be up.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we've mentioned already the ferry maintenance building, on how much of an improvement that will be. But I also want to highlight that I think we can develop some service plan. Once slip 3 is dredged, we need a service plan that shows some use of this Cat Ferry terminal, or else we're gonna find ourselves in exactly the same place where FTA is saying, pay us back for the investments. So that is an important attribute that we've got to realize and think through. Same findings that I started with. The facility, the ferry services are essential for the expanded Hutchinson Island convention facilities. We've got plenty of capital money, but the operating money is where we fall short. It's the before federal funds are applied, we have a $1,194,000 operating deficit for fiscal 25. We know the demand's going to increase. We think the additional landing in Plant Riverside is worth the investment. There are multiple ways we can run the ferries, and we will be further exploring that. But going forward, we're going to need about $3 million more a year in local funding to run the ferry services that we need. And that's the discussion that you're executive director is really beginning to get engaged in. But we've got to make sure we have the operating money for it. And lastly, it's running the ferries is a very important thing. But running our bus service is incredibly important. And the people that we get the jobs and the services every day. And so we can't sustain the ferry program at the expense of the local bus service. And that's a real key point that I wanted to make. Thank you for listening to me, and I'd love to keep having questions.
Wasn't there a slide that talked about a bridge?
Well,
Bus bridge, and
at the very beginning was the comparison.
right, but I thought that we were talking about doing the bus bridge, getting people over on the bus ourselves. Was that not in here?
That is not in this presentation, the bus bridge discussion. We have had that discussion.
Oh, I think you're talking about hypothetical, what it compared how the bus.
I got that part, but
Okay.
I thought there was a slide in here that says something about us doing a bus bridge, and I was concerned about the charter regulations and what would that mean to us, but if it's not here, maybe I just misread.
Yeah, I know we have talked about it, Dr. Nader.
Yeah, so the bus bridge was put, in order when the service breaks down, that we just have, announced it to the public and then we run the bus bridge.
Right,
As a substitute for.
I understand that, but I thought it was something in here, and I must have misread, but we were talking about, I think, installing a bus bridge, which I think is either another route or, go back to the same type of conversation. And I have a problem not having numbers. So I thought, because you got to keep flipping to figure out what slide, what number.
I'll make sure I correct that. Now, our intention here is to produce for you a brief report that will be in a Word document or a graphical report that you will be able to use to communicate to key stakeholders, the city, the county, the state, your plan for the ferry service. This presentation was intended to be informative at this point, make sure that we hear your questions. We're also going to talk to some of the other key stakeholders like the Sandy Board and listening to their issues, and that'll inform the final report. But the final report is probably at least 2 months away from being produced.
Okay.
Yes, the goal was to, of course, we don't take anything to stakeholders prior to introducing it to our board. So that's the purpose of this overview, because as we began talking about how we're going to fully fund ferry operations, we are going to have to take it to the city, the county, Sandy Convention Center, to decide how this Savannah Bells ferry system will be 100% funded.
Are we gonna have a series of public meetings?
Yes, once we meet with stakeholders and talk through, we will definitely do that.
But I think what's gonna really come up now is how soon you're gonna put these new vessels in the water. You start the discussion with these stakeholders, that's gonna come up. So
We still gotta put the dampener on them.
and whatever else.
Yes, it's still work to be done. Yeah,
So those are due in April, and we'll get them on as soon as we possibly can. We will remain, it's my best guess right now.
So you won't get that first price until April.
Yeah, it's a custom made muffler that's being built, I believe, in Washington State. So as soon as they are able to release and send it to us, they will have a plan how to put it on. Yeah.
So we'll probably be able to introduce the ships for the summer.
Yeah, oh, sure, we can operate it. I mean, before we have the muffler is really just gonna help keep the noise level
But is
down.
it loud?
So at certain RPM levels on the generator, it gets a certain resonance that does create a very loud noise that's louder than our current ferries. But I tell you, here we get operations, we'll see, for instance, pure EV load, you can't hear anything hardly. I mean, it's just whisper quiet going up and down the river. It's really just when the generator kicks on to a certain level, like when we're really picking up the throttle to get off the dock, that it can create a really loud resonance that's a little unsettling, but I think, yeah, these mufflers were a little damper that. But we just don't wanna create, you know, sort of noise ordinance issue with the main concern.
So does it kicks in the noise at any time or?
It all depends on the battery charge level. So the system will automatically try to keep our battery charge between a certain level, between say 40 to 60% in one mode, possibly 20 to 80%. So the generator kicks on as needed to keep those batteries charged. So it can be kind of an unpredictable thing in a way, you know.
And, you know, my question is really more about the deficits that we're having. And I think you said about talking to, so somebody has money that they can.
Well, the conversations, started, I'm sure before I became interim, but that was a conversation that, I put back on the table simply because the true up has not occurred since 2019. And that's what the SAMI agreement said. I inquired about that. So now that these new ferries are here, ears are opening and they realize the cost of operations is increasing. And they are willing to support that. And right now, considering options such as increasing the port fee. So there is very positive communication about supporting the ferry 100%.
Well, they should be very supportive of it, considering it moves their tourists back and forth so they can spend money.
And I think as much as you have conversations, much you get updates, it'd be helpful for us to know how that's coming along. Because operating like this is just not good. This makes sense.
Does this create any noise hazard for riders? Or is it just the surrounding area?
No, I would say hazards more annoyance.
Because I rode in the back of it one time, right on the motor. I think it was Susie K. Taylor.
Yeah, so in fact, our smaller vessels built in 2003, exactly what she's talking about, the noise levels inside those cabins. I wasn't here at the time, I was back in 2003. We recorded noise levels approaching 100 decibels inside the cabin noise. And that's because of the wire and the hydraulics running through. And I know that was a big controversy when those vessels were first built. From the stories I've heard, there was some mitigation efforts to try to dampen that. Didn't work too well. So, you know, when our crew runs those vessels, they run with earplugs in so they can safely hear. So when you compare our new vessels to that, our new vessels are nowhere near a constant 100 decibel noise level. It's nowhere near that. Yeah, it's more of an annoyance. And we certainly don't want to be waking people up in their hotel rooms.
One other thing I just wanted to mention is that whenever an area goes from all commercial to commercial residential, you have commercial ordinances and you have residential ordinances that you have to comply with. With the construction of the Eastern Ward, with a lot of residential properties and residential development on Hutchinson Island, we have to be sensitive to the noise ordinance. And one thing that I think is wise is always including public transportation at the site development process, because there are a lot of costs that comes with that, and coming after the development, it's very cumbersome. So we need to really advocate for public transportation to be a part of the site development review process.
We've asked to be put on like a checklist. How do we get on the checklist?
A change of ordinance to include that as a part of the review process.
We can come and make recommendations, but if it's not in an ordinance, the developer's not going to.
They're not gonna do it.
Right, but
Because it's a
we've
cost,
asked
there's a
before
cost.
on how to get that done,
Yeah.
so how do we get that done? Do we make a formal
Through-
request
Through.
to the city and the county?
Through the MPO. The MPC, because they're the site plan reviewers.
So do we need to
And
do a
we-
formal request?
I think we should. I really do. I think we should send the request to both city, county, and to the MPO.
Okay, so how can we have that as a charge going forward?
We can move forward with making that written request, sure.
Okay.
You heard that, Alderman Leggett?
No, I heard it. Yeah. Yeah, do that.
I would love to see the ferry operating in black.
Well, it is a boat, so you break out another 1,000 every time you ride it.
Yes,
That's correct.
yeah,
It's a haul in the water you pour money into.
yeah.
So,
In your report, when you talk about, whether you have one crew, two crew, or three crews operating, that means you have more manpower, that means you pay more people, so was that cost, the labor costs
yeah.
factored into that as well?
Yes, and that's one of the things we really, as we work with, whether it's the Sandy Board or others, they're gonna pay for. We can't expect to have one ferry in operation and then magically tomorrow have 5 ferries in operation. We go from 2 crews to 10 crews.
Right.
We have to have the manpower budgeted for and on staff to be able to cover these peaks in the service.
I do want to mention right now, currently, when we put 2 ferries into service, we are requested usually by Visit Savannah, saying, hey, we have this large convention, we plan ahead, we schedule the crew, but we also charge either Visit Savannah or that group $250 an hour, essentially, to be able to run those extra services. So right now, that is being offset by those fees that we charge to them. But if in the future, we want to have a regular 2 ferry service going at all times, all the time, we will need to at least double the amount of crew we currently have, which of course, at least doubles
Yeah.
the amount that we need for operating costs for personnel.
And that's on us.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, it doesn't, have to be. See,
Right.
it has to be, and I think Kat's portion is really, our relationship with the FTA to support capital. With the growth on Hutchinson Island, it's evident the Savannah Bell Ferry system is going to grow. So as we secure grants to support whether 1, 2, or 3 additional ferries, we have to start thinking about that now as the numbers come in. Related to growth in ridership, even additional dock space. We need to be thinking about those kinds of things, so that a financial plan, a stakeholder buy-in, federal, state dollars buy-in to support economic growth within the Savannah Channel.
But as Hudson Island grows, that means they're gonna be paying more taxes.
Yes, they're in the tax district, yes.
But the tax district, and it will show, we even looked at
It's more.
what, it's not enough. It's
cover.
literally in the
Right.
hundreds of thousands of dollars, like what additional tax revenue is generated on Hutchinson Island. It is not the $1 million shortfall that we have. We've got to have something else besides this ferry service tax district on Hutchinson Island.
That's not enough.
Well, and we have to keep in mind, the development authority, they provide incentives to get development here.
Yes.
And that takes away from transit tax money because we're not collecting it because of commitments made. And that's why I say transportation needs to be a part of the planning process holistically. Because that's money away from providing public transportation.
Will signal play a part in this?
CETA, I don't think they are part of the Sandy group, but these are discussions wherein public transportation, which is Chatham Area Transit, we need to ask CETA to be considerate of the impact on transit dollars.
Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. And if there are other questions or other research that you think is necessary, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. With yes, sir.
You need to close the meeting.
All right, I would like to thank everybody for coming out today. Very informative meeting. We're looking forward to get our ferries on the road. At this time, our next board meeting will be March 25th.
February.
February. February.
Yes.
At this time, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.